about how to prepare for a KYC AML interview, and I have a couple of questions where that can be expected in an interview, and there are the common basic fundamentals that each and every KYC and AML guy should know. And recently I have been part of few KYC AML groups, and in the groups most of the people requesting like, does anyone have KYC notes regarding interview preparation, or AML notes, or what are sanctions. So there are a couple of questions the people are looking out for, that which are very common that they should know, but unfortunately the people are still seeking help even after working for 1 to 2 years in the KYC. They are seeking help to answer those type of questions. So I have prepared the couple of questions which will help you to clear interview, the basic level of interview. Like this all these questions will help an individual who has experience of 1 to 3 years or maybe 5 years, depends upon the job which you're applying for. So without getting further delay, let's get into the video. So how you have to prepare for the KYC interview, it exactly depends upon the job description. So all the questions which I am going to discuss further will help most of the all KYC ML interviews. For example, mostly right now the hirings are happening for KYC, client onboarding, end-to-end KYC. So it will help, the questions will help them. And also the sanctions are again few types: name screening sanctions, payment screening sanctions. These questions will help those individuals as well. And transaction monitoring, actually the interviews based on transaction monitoring, it depends upon case to case basis. Basics can be you can learn from this video, and the rest of them you can only learn by if you already worked in the process. So that cannot be discussed in an open platform, because that involves case to case basis, scenario to scenario to rule. You need to know about the case study, how it has happened and all. So apart from the transaction monitoring, it covers all the interview questions, mostly for the basic level, which are of 1 to 3 years or 1 to 5 years. Okay. And the first interview, the basic interview, like, let it be, if you're applying for sanctions also, they will ask these type of questions to test you how far you are well versed with the KYC AML laws. So the first and the best basic question they ask is, what do you know about KYC, CDD, EDD? Because that's where the process starts, the banking process starts. So people, even if you're not applying for the KYC client onboarding, if you're applying for sanctions also, they'll ask you this question to test your knowledge or interest, how far this guy can know about KYC, CDD, EDD. So questions include the first basic and the best question an interviewer can ask you in any interview, in any KYC email interview. Let it be sanctions, let it be transaction monitoring, let it be you're applying for the KYC client onboarding, let it be you're applying for CLM analyst, like whatever domain you're applying, this will be the first and the basic question. So they ask you about, what do you know about KYC, CDD and EDD? Or they can ask you, if you're a fresher, or maybe with the 1 year or 2 year experience, they'll ask you a straight question: can you speak what you know about KYC, CDD for a 1 minute? You can just randomly collect Google information and you can just put it, but that doesn't give you the vague information what exactly the interviewer looking for. So I'll give you 3 simple answers which you can explain them in an interview. Like, if you want more information also, there is a dedicated video for each and every question in my channel. You can go and check it out. And this video, or this entire video, is only for the how you can answer in an interview. So if they ask you about KYC, CDD, EDD, you can start the process like this. KYC is nothing but the collection of documents in order to identify the identity of a customer. Because why the banks identify identity of a customer? Because they are the one who are doing with business with the customers. So KYC is nothing but the collection of documents where the identity of the customer can be assessed. So the next question they will ask you, okay, what documents the banks collect? So if it is an individual, you can just simply passport and driving license. If it is an entity, they collect documents like memorandum of association, articles of association, incorporation document, or certificate of incorporation, or consolidated financial statements, and prospectus or adhering prospectus. These are the documents which are collected for entity if you're doing the KYC checks. So in simple, you can just mention as a KYC is nothing but the collection of documents in order to identify the identity of the customer. So identity is very important. So next comes the CDD process. CDD is nothing but the client due diligence, where once the identity is established and every customer has a risk, and in the CDD stage we assess the risk assessment of a customer. So how risk assessment can be happened, that will be your next question, because once you answer this question, the interviewer definitely gets into mind, okay, he mentioned the risk assessment, let us ask him the next question about risk assessment to know how he well versed with the risk assessment factors. Because every time in the first 5 minutes, of interview, you have to pull the ball to your court, so you can play along with the entire interview, with switching from concept to concept. So if you start this way, the ball will be in the court. So the each and every answer you give will lead to the next question. For example, you say, in CDD process, the banks analyze the risk assessment of a customer. So the next question will be, how do you analyze the risk assessment of a customer? Because risk assessment of customer you already know, so you can easily answer them. So the ball is still in your court, you can play along the entire interview. So in the first 5 minutes, you need to analyze how the interviewer asking your questions. Then it can ease you the entire interview process. If you are like already well experienced, you don't need to deal with that. If you are like experienced freshers, like with 1 to 3 years, and you have some like little panic, or you have some little nervous, you can use this technique to know, analyzing the assessment of the interviewer, and help you to the entire interview process. Okay, and the next question I'll ask you about what are the how you can assess the risk assessment of a customer. And to assess the risk assessment of a customer, there are 4 factors of how the customer can be assessed. One is nature of business, and location or jurisdiction, and third one is product or service, and fourth one is transactions. Yeah, there's for all these questions there is a dedicated video. You can go and check in the YouTube channel. You can clearly understand, okay, what is nature of business, what is location or jurisdiction, what is a product or service, what is the transaction. So it will give you a more idea. No one will ask you in depth, but unless you're applying for SME or QC or QA role. So you can go and check it out in the channel. It will be helpful for you to understand in depth if it is necessary. So now the first question is done, the KYC. What is CDD? CDD is a process where risk assessment of a customer is assessed. And in CDD process, if the risk assessment of the customer is found to be high risk, then the case will move to EDD, enhanced due diligence, and that's it. You can explain these KYC, CDD, EDD, and risk assessment in just 1 minute or 2 minutes. Or if you have very strong confidence, you can just drag that to 3 to 4 minutes. So that gives you confidence for the interviewer. Okay, this guy has some knowledge or interest, so that he pulled out some information. Okay, and once they'll ask you about EDD. Okay, what happens once the case moved to EDD? So in EDD, we do some extensive investigation on the customer, because the case moved to high risk, and most of the high risk cases will be handled by the senior management, or at the manager level, because they contain some sensitive information. And there is one more way when the case will be moved to high risk. And during the CDD process, you found out that the customer is a PEP or RCA, relatively close associate. Then also the case will move to then also the case will move to high risk. So you can explain these things like in detail. They can understand, okay, this guy has some knowledge. Then the interview will move to the next question, the type of questions you can expect in an interview once this is done. But this is the basic. If you know about what is KYC, CDD, EDD, that gives an knowledge to the interviewer. Okay, this guy has some background knowledge about KYC, CDD, EDD. So the types of questions can be asked will be within this boundary. So the next question they ask you about sanctions. Even though if you're applying for KYC AML interview, they'll ask you about sanctions, and if you're applying for sanction, they'll ask you about KYC AML, KYC, CDD, EDD, because these are the few basics that that every interviewer expects you to learn. So when they ask you about the sanctions, you can explain them about sanctions are the restrictive measures imposed by the countries or regulatory bodies or international organizations. That's it. What are the restrictive measures? Then the next question will be, you mentioned the restrictive measures. What are the restrictive measures? So they can be financial restrictions, economic restrictions, travel restrictions, or sports restrictions. So this will be your next question also. Like types of sanctions. This is like economic sanctions, financial sanctions, travel sanctions, and sports sanctions. And if you Google it, types of sanctions, you will get like n number of different types of sanctions. But don't get confused with it. See, if you are only very confident about sports sanctions and travel sanctions, let give only 2 examples and tell the interviewer, sir, I'm only aware of these 2. I'll learn it more. but don't go to the Google. And if you Google it, definitely you'll get n number of sanctions. And if you read the description, mostly everything will be the similar. Economic sanctions and financial sanctions, it looks always similar. You don't get confused and you put that confused information on the table, and let's no don't be give chance to the interviewer to judge you on that. So whatever like, let it be 2 sanctions or 3 sanctions or 2 points, let them give a clear explanation so that they can understand, okay, he has some knowledge, we can give him a chance. Okay. And when it comes to types of sanctions, I'll give like very small line to understand about how you can memorize it and you can explain in the interview, because interview hardly takes 20 minutes or max to 30 minutes. So because in 20 to 30 minutes you have to impress the interviewer. It is not about the correct answer or not wrong answer, it is about the impressing the interviewer. You just have to keep this in mind, because sanctions and KYC, the policies and process depends upon bank to bank. You might have worked in some other bank and the interviewer is working in some other bank. The policies might change, the percentages might change. So it is not about the correct answer or wrong answer, it is always about the impressing the interviewer, or you should make him feel that confident, okay, this guy is very confident, if given a chance he can prove something. That's all about the entire process of you being interviewed. Okay. And I'll give you a small example about the types of sanctions. Sanctions, the definition I've given you, that the point is very important. Sanctions are the restrictive measures. The restrictive measures is very important, and that are imposed by countries or regulatory bodies or international organizations. Sometimes these international organizations and regulatory bodies are the same. So you can just mention as sanctions are the restrictive measures imposed by the countries or regulatory bodies or international organizations. And the types of sanctions. Economic sanctions. So economic sanctions are simply nothing but restricting certain country or the certain region in order to do business with other countries, like trading between the goods or services. So when we see the economic, it is restricting the doing business. You just keep that as in mind. For example, OFAC is nothing but US sanctions, who has imposed sanctions on Iran in order not to export oil to the other countries or other US countries. Why? Because the oil was the main source of revenue for Iran. If you restrict Iran on oil, they can financially be suppressed. So that is a reason, that is an example of economic sanctions. And in sanctions, you mainly remember that the more examples you give, it is not about explaining, it is giving the more examples. When you give more examples, there is a chance that the interviewer can be easily convinced. Because when you give an US imposed sanctions or Iran regarding the export of oil, then you are giving an idea to that, okay, this guy knows about what Iran does, what is the main source of Iran, oil extraction, oil business. Okay, so that gives you, like, their your interview will be half done. Okay, this is an example of economic sanctions. When it comes to financial sanctions are restricting a certain country or the region or the individuals of the country in order to not to engage with any financial transactions or banking transactions. Whenever you see financial or restricting the banking transactions or banking related businesses. So when the EU, European Union, has been imposed financial sanctions on Russia, which means that Russia should not be engaged with any financial transactions or any banking relationships with the rest of the countries. Okay, this was a small example how you can explain in an interview economic sanctions and financial sanctions. Now it comes to the travel sanctions. Travel sanctions are nothing but a sanction that impose that the specific country, the peoples of specific country should not travel to other countries. And sports sanctions also are the same. Recently Russia has been sanctioned, so some people of some athletics of Russia are not supposed to participate in the Olympics. When you give the recent example, then they'll get to know, okay, he is like following what is happening around the world. Okay, these are the 4 examples. There are many other types of sanctions, but this is not required to explain them in all the interview. These are the 4 sanctions which you can explain them clearly in an interview. And sometimes if the interviewer is also very good at these like the fundamentals, what is happening in the world, he may ask you some tricky questions, like if Russia is being imposed travel sanctions, what do you mean by that? Or for example, he will ask you, I can travel to Russia because Russia has been travel banned, I can travel to Russia or not? So your answer should be no, because whenever but for example, US imposed travel sanctions on Russia, which means that the Russian citizens should not travel to US and US citizens should not travel to Russia. So it applies vice versa. So that's where you have to understand the whole concept of what is travel sanctions. They'll some if the interviewer is very clever, he can ask you these type of questions also to test you how knowledge, or you just Google it and came to the interview, or you nearly have that interest and you learned it. Okay, these are the four type of sanctions. And the next question, that is a mandatory question that you can expect in a sanctions interview, is who impose sanctions? There are many countries impose sanctions, but mainly the interview will expect you to know these four: OFAC, EU, European Union, UNSC, or just simply UN, United Nations Security Council, UKHMT, United Kingdom, Her Majestic Treasury, or His Majestic Treasury. These are the four international bodies that can impose sanctions. Okay, like they don't ask you what in depth, what OFAC does, what EU does. It is up to, if, and even though if they ask you, you can just mention that the simple, not a common thing. They come back to money laundering and terrorist financing. That's the basic principle, the basic underlying principle of what OFAC does, what EU does, what UN does, what UKHMD. Their common goal is to prevent money laundering and terrorist financing. Okay, you can just simply say that. If you ask in depth, you can just simply tell, I'm not much aware of that, but I'll learn it soon. Okay, but the next question can be when sanctions are performed. This is some advanced level of question. If you're already in the process, you will know when sanctions are performed. Or if you have just have 1 year or 2 years of experience, it can be a tricky to you. So the sanctions are performed in three types of ways. Once the sanctions are performed during the client onboarding. When you onboard a client, the client has to be go through three different types of checks. We'll do a risk assessment, we'll do identity check, and after that we need to go through three different types of checks. One is PEP, adverse media, sanctions. If he is a PEP in the CDD, he will move to high risk. So that's how the case will move to high risk. Apart from PEP, we do also checks about adverse media or sanction checks. So these are the three checks which we do during client onboarding. So the question is all about when you perform sanctions, like what are the different scenarios to perform sanctions. When sanctions are performed during client onboarding, second time sanctions are performed during ODD, ongoing due diligence or periodic review, and third scenario where we perform sanctions when a client made cross-border payment. So every cross-border payment, before it was credited to the beneficiary or before it reaches the border, it has to go through sanction screening. So these are the three ways sanction screening can be performed. Now let's get back to again the previously, these are types of questions which you can expect from the interviewer. PEP, because we have taught about PEP, adverse media, and sanctions we have already looked. Sanctions, apart from these type of questions, they can't go in depth. They can go based on the scenarios, based like why Iran is sanctioned, why North Korea is sanctioned, or why Cuba is sanctioned. Okay, apart from like there is one more question that you can expect in the sanctions interview is types of countries. What are the sanctioned countries? Even if you Google it, you'll get multiples of sanctioned countries, but all those were not the which interview are expecting. There are only four sanctioned countries, and others are partially sanctioned. So what are the four sanctioned countries? Iran, Syria, Cuba, North Korea. These are the four sanctioned countries which every banks follow it, and rest of the countries like Russia, Ukraine, Somalia, Venezuela, or Democratic Republic of Congo, these comes under the partially sanctioned. So the difference between sanctions and partially sanctioned we can discuss in a complete different video, or if you can go and check it out in the like my previous videos, you can find some information on it. Like unless you're working for completely unless you're applying for the like complete sanction screening process, this is not required. Even though if they ask also, you can just know I'm aware of it, but I don't know the in-depth information what are sanctions or what are partially sanctioned. Partially sanctioned are also known as embargoes. Okay, these are the four sanctioned countries which we have: North Korea, Syria, Cuba, Iran. they can ask you, if you are like applying for a higher level position, they can ask you why North Korea is sanctioned, why Cuba is sanctioned. Like all the common factors why these were sanctioned, because they encourage terrorism and human rights abuse, and they are always involved in proliferation financing, which means that the financing of terrorist weapons and military weapons, which are used which are used to implode terrorist activities. So if you want any in-depth knowledge about it, you can Google it, or you can go to my LinkedIn profile. I have given a clear explanation about why North Korea is sanctioned, why Cuba is sanctioned. If possible, I'll give that notes in the description as well. You can go and check it out, and you can apply one countries to everything. Mostly all countries will be have the same thing why they are being sanctioned. Okay, this is all about sanctions, and next we'll move to PEP. I think this video is going to be very lengthy. Bear the patience, and you can learn more about. You can easily crack the interview if you watch the entire video. What are the types of questions it can be asked? Because there is no systematic structure. How can they can ask? Because I already prepared a set of questions. Based on the questions, I'm just going in a flow. Okay, and if you feel this video if you feel this video is really help you, just give a thumbs up, and just comment how many years of experience you have in the comment section, so that it will be helpful for me how many people are watching with number of years of experience. That will help me to do the videos, some extensive advanced videos. Okay, now comes under they definitely ask you about PEP. What do you know about PEP? PEPs are, you can explain in this way: politically exposed person who have predominant public function. It simply it means PEPs are the politically exposed person who have most influence, or who can influence more number of people. So you can explain give this explanation, but the standard definition is PEPs are the politically exposed person who have predominant public function. Predominant means they have more dominance over the public. So predominant public function, in simple you can explain, in order to make sure that interviewer understand what is your perspective of predominant. It is nothing but people are PEPs are the politically exposed person who can influence more people. This is where you can explain it. And when you say politically exposed person, that doesn't mean it is only related to political. It can be anyone who can influence more number of people. Let it be Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk, because if Elon Musk gives a tweet, it can influence the stocks of a company. We have seen in this case in the example of Twitter. Okay, these are the examples of politically exposed person. And next comes on the types of PEP. There are three types of PEP: domestic PEP, international PEP, foreign PEP. And I have made again dedicated video how you can explain these thing in an interview, or a dedicated video with examples. You can go and check it out that video. Okay, now done with the PEP, politically exposed person, and they can ask you about adverse media. Adverse media is nothing but checking if there is any negative news on a person or an entity. Okay, in simple you can explain this. And these are the mostly types of question that you can experience in a basic KYC AML interview. And sometimes they'll ask you about what do you know about KYC or client onboarding, or have you done any KYC of an individual or an entity. Because if you're applying for KYC client onboarding, they'll definitely ask you. If you're already well aware of the process, then fine, but I'll give you brief how KYC of an entity can be done. We take XYZ limited company, and it came for a onboarding into the bank. So that case will move to your case. The first thing you need to know about it, because the relationship manager of the bank, or we collect all the KYC documents as I mentioned in previously. So it comes to the client onboarding team, and we have to review it here. So what exactly we do, once we get those documents, we go and check it out, where it is located, in which country it is located, and what is the nature of business of that entity. And we have some restrictions that we should not onboard businesses with some industry like adult industry or gambling industry. It completely depends upon the policies of that bank. It may differ also. Some banks they onboard them, but some banks they don't onboard them. So that is the reason why we check nature of business and the location. And next thing we look at about who are the directors of the company. And we also look about our shareholders, and we check all the documents, we'll document them. And next thing we check about the shareholding structure. Like once we collect the shareholders, and we need to check the percentage each shareholder holds. and if anyone is holding 25% or more, they can be called as UBO, ultimately beneficiary owner. They can be n number of shareholders for a private limited company, but what we are concerned about, those who have 25% or more. Why 25% or more? Because only those people have that right to take decision making. People with 1%, 2%, we are not bothered about it because they don't have that decision making power. So we collect the information about who are the directors and who are the shareholders, and once we collect the shareholders information, and we check how much the percentage that shareholder is owning. If he is owning 25% or more, we classify them as UBO, ultimately beneficiary owner. So once this collection of documents or this entire process is done, then we have to screen them. Who will we will screen? We will screen all the directors and all the UBOs, you ultimately beneficiary owners. So what happens in screening? How do we do screening? We have a certain tools like WorldCheck, LexisNexis, or RDC. So let us take LexisNexis, and we screen these directors and shareholders in LexisNexis to check whether they are PEP, or is there any adverse media on them, or is there any or they're sanctioned individuals, or they have any connections with the sanctioned entities or sanctioned individuals. I see interview. Money laundering. What do you understand by money laundering? So people simply say money laundering is nothing but converting black money into white money. So like if your people are freshers or 1 year or 2 years experience, they'll give you this explanation, but that gives you not a professional look. You have to like make your answer look very professional, even though that is a correct answer. But you have to make you look professional, because if you're already an experience of 1 year, they will expect you to use some kind of terminology before you are answering a question. So if they ask you about what is money laundering, you can just simply say that money laundering is that conversion of illicit funds into a legitimate source. Whenever we use illicit funds, it is like funds derived from the illegal source. And when we say legitimate source, we are converting into legitimate source. We are converting into financial institutions or financial transactions. So you can simply answer that money laundering is the process of converting illicit funds into legitimate source. So how that takes place? The next question will be okay, what are the types of stages of money laundering? Here is the basic placement, layering, and integration. And it will be very good if you explain this with an example, like what happens in a placement stage, what happens in layering stage, what happens in integration stage. So that gives him a clear understanding. Okay, he has got that interest, so he learned more. So our main perspective of interview, as I said in the previously, it is not about giving the correct answer or wrong answer. It is about impressing him, or you should show your interest. It should not giving the correct answer. It is to show your interest regarding the topic or the subject or the position you are applied for. Okay. And next question they can ask you about the pillars of KYC. So this is same actually. We have already covered this before. Pillars of KYC is nothing but the process. There is one video in my channel which covers this question like in detail. That comes under the customer lifecycle management. So if you just go to my channel and look for the customer lifecycle management, you can answer this question. They can ask you in this way also, pillars of KYC, or what do you know about customer lifecycle management. The answer is same. So pillars of KYC include CIP, customer identification program, which tells about how you can identify a customer. So what we do, like in which process we identify the customer? In KYC. So that's what we already covered before. And next will be the risk assessment. So risk assessment can be done in CDD. And next one will be CAP, customer acceptance program. So when can you accept the customer? When your risk assessment is done, when you feel it is safe to accept the customer. So this policy or program tells about how you can accept the customer, on what terms you can accept the customer. And the fourth one will be, so once you accepted the customer, it is not like, okay, I have done the KYC and I have accepted the customer, he was onboarded, so his behavior might change anytime. So then we have to do ODD, ongoing due diligence or periodic review. So that is fourth. And fifth one will be, once you have done the ODD, ongoing due diligence or periodic review, you found out the customer behavior has been changed, or he has become no, he has been have some connections with the sanction individual. So in this case, you have to exit the customer. This is called exit of the relationship. So these are the 5 factors or 5 pillars of KYC, or you can just tell the customer lifecycle management, which includes CIP, customer identification program or policy, risk assessment, CAP, customer acceptance program or policy, and fourth one will be ODD, ongoing due diligence, and fifth one will be exiting of the customer. And exiting can happen two types: voluntary exit and forcible exit. For example, we identify the customer has some connections with the sanction and we exit him forcefully, and the other one will be the voluntary exit. For example, the customer feels that he is getting more benefits with other banks, he voluntarily exit the relationship, he voluntarily closes the account and he moves out. These are the ways how the customer can be exited. So these are the mostly frequently asked questions in KYC AML interview. If you very confident with these questions, and if you are not some tricky questions or some system or the process related questions, like what exactly you do when given this case, that can be differ from the perspective to perspective, but these are the main questions which you can expect in an interview. If you answer these questions very confidently, there are chances more for you to recruit. Okay, I'll give you few more questions also which you can google it. And these, because why I'm not answering this question, because this depends upon case to case basis, process to process, bank to bank. Okay, uh, they'll ask you about what type of entities you have been done onboarding. So the type of entities include sole trader, partnership, private limited, public limited, charity, trust. These are the main that they can expect. In the job description they'll clearly mentioning you this. And there are few more like SPV, special purpose vehicles, foundation. So if you are like very in the job discussion, they clearly mention about we are looking for the candidates who have done KYC for trust and charity. You have to look for these type of questions. What are the parties involved? Trustee, there are three parties, and what are the documents required for the trust in order to do KYC. That includes trust deed. And if it is a charity, that includes document from the charity commission. So it includes, and these questions can be answered only if you have already worked in that process. Even if you google also, you cannot answer these questions. It always required, if you be genuine to the interviewer, at least you might get a chance. Depends upon the demand. Okay, if they have demand, and if you answer these basic questions correctly, and if you like honestly tell, I have now worked for I have now never done KYC for a trust or charity, but if given a chance I can learn it. It will help you to, the chances will be more, instead of pulling the data from the google and answering it. Okay, if you are already working it, you can look for these type of questions. What are the documents you collect, and what are the parties involved? Trust, what is the difference between trust and charity, and what is the difference between foundation and charity? I guess only HSBC has the record of recruiting people for this process. And there is one more question called, what do you know about correspondent banking? What do you know about CBDDQ? So these are very lengthy. Only if you're working in the process you can answer it. It is not like googling and mugging up. So in general, I'll give you an example what is about. There is already a dedicated video on this. It is this only in order to explain this one concept, correspondent banking and CBDDQ. It takes almost 1 hour to 2 hours. So there is a dedicated video, like in short dedicated video for about 30 minutes in my channel. You can go and check it out. And okay, these are the questions you can expect. There can be other questions based on situation, tricky based on the role you're applying for. And if you need more, like if you have any idea of these questions, you just drop down in the comment section. I can pick those questions and I can answer in my next video. I think this video will help you to crack your interview. And if you have any questions, please drop down in the comment section. And I just need your support so that this video will reach to more useful people. So just comment your opinion in the comment section. It is a good or a bad, it is useful, or what is your perspective, because the length of the video is very high. So please do comment your opinion in the comment section, so that it will be easy for me to do videos, the upcoming videos, by giving seeing your feedback. Okay, thank you. That's all for today. See you in the next video.